Hi, Pierreville. Hello. Thank you so much for joining me today. How are you doing? Especially you, Vince. Vince sent in this video, which looks pretty freaking cool. It's called Australia's Flying Heroes. He says it's about the Royal Australian Flying Doctor Service, established over 110 years ago and pioneered air ambulances worldwide. That's pretty cool. RFDS. So I'm excited to watch this. Let's go.
It's 6:30 p.m. A resident of the Kiwaruka community falls off a ladder and is knocked unconscious. Found by a friend, it's clear that the patient has received significant head trauma and needs to be evacuated to a hospital quickly. In the most remote part of the Australian outback, there are no hospitals for hundreds of miles.
That's a really interesting... I had not considered that living out in the outback, for that reason, is a bit dangerous, huh? Hundreds of miles to the closest hospital. Wow. There really is no other way to get to them except by the air. I wonder, they must use helicopters, I assume.
An ambulance to the nearest...
That's really cool, though. That's really cool. And kind of a uniquely Australian, not totally uniquely, obviously there's remote parts of the United States and stuff, but not like there is in Australia. And so that's really cool that this program, you know, those people don't get left behind.
Nearest hospital could take upwards of half a day just to reach our patient, whose condition is deteriorating fast, and another half day to bring them back to the hospital. Another resident calls 1300, contacting the only service capable of getting there in enough time to give our...
There's a special emergency number for this service. That is pretty dope.
Patient a fighting chance before they deteriorate.
There's not really, not that I know of, I'm thinking, I don't think there's any other number here in America apart from 911 as far as contacting emergency services. So that's pretty cool.
Too much. The call is received by dispatch at the Royal Flying Doctor Service in Alice Springs, 390 miles away. Alice Springs is the nearest city capable of treating our patient
airplanes
effectively and the closest RFDS base.
That's awesome, because that's a lot faster. That's so much faster.
Crew are briefed as they
But how do they land?
start off their Pilatus PC-12, and within minutes, Flying Dock 872 is airborne.
Oh my God.
The Kiwaruka Community Airstrip is not paved, controlled, or even illuminated in the same way as large airports. When the doctor's coming, it's a community effort to prepare the runway.
Wow.
The sun's going down, and without light, the runway will be invisible to the pilot.
Oh my God. This is nuts.
A group of the townspeople
This is nuts.
will set out onto the runway in their vehicles to quickly light the strip's gas canisters that line the runway.
So in like all the remote towns, you have this big dirt landing strip, and everybody in the town gets up. I mean, not everybody, but people in the town, volunteers. Oh my God, that's so cool.
Less than 45
Never seen anything like this.
minutes after takeoff, the Pilatus lands, carrying a pilot and a flight nurse who checks
I mean, it's kind of a dangerous job as a pilot. Flying onto a runway like this, I feel like that takes some skill.
takeoff. The
Look at it rock back and
Pilatus
forth.
lands, carrying a pilot and a flight nurse who checks our patient's vital signs and evaluates their condition. They are placed onto a stretcher and lifted onto the plane. The doors are shut, the engine is started, and just like that, our patient is whisked away into the night sky. Stabilized on the
That is so cool how you guys are willing as a community to do that, all that for one man, you know what I mean? One person. It just shows how important, how much you value human life. What I'm thinking is, if this was in America, man, you might as well file for bankruptcy on the plane. This would cost, even a normal ambulance ride is like $2,000, and that's nothing compared to this. You know what I mean? This would cost like $80,000 or something here in America.
flight, within the hour, our patient will be received at Alice Springs Hospital. For a journey that would take maybe more than a day by road, this whole ordeal is over in about 3 hours. What was described
3 hours.
Just now is what is dealt with day in, day out by Australia's Royal Flying Doctor Service.
And this really is uniquely, I've never seen a emergency plane. They do have helicopters here in America, you know, to transport critical patients to hospitals far away, you know, that they might need a specialist or a surgeon far away, or to get someone, you know, I guess from a remote area.
Or RFDS. Founded on the 5th of May, 1928, the RFDS is the world's oldest air ambulance service, standing at 94 years old at the time of writing, 2022. Like most air ambulances, the RFDS is a charitable, non-profit organization relying on the donations of others to maintain their life-savings operations all across the Australian outback.
So this isn't part of the government. That is pretty remarkable. So does that mean it's free to get picked up in one of these things? If it's charity funded? Man, that's wild.
An air ambulance service like the RFDS is truly essential in a country as sparsely populated as Australia, as there are countless towns, villages, and settlements hundreds of miles from the nearest hospital, and transportation by road is simply not practical when time is of the essence in a country so vast. The RFDS found its beginnings in the mind of the Reverend John Flynn in 1912. Posted to remote parts of the Australian state of Victoria, Flynn saw that people who felt ill and needed urgent medical attention would have to travel for tens or hundreds of miles for days on end, using a primitive road system in primitive vehicles, or a horse and cart, or even on camelback. This method of transport was not sterile. It was slow and allowed patients to die en route, provided that transport was even available at all. During the mid-1910s, Reverend Flynn initially set up hospitals in bush communities under the Australian Inland Mission. However, this still left patients out on ranches outside the sphere of any practical medical coverage.
Oh, man. Hold on.
Flynn had previously written numerous pamphlets on the subject, one of which, A Call to the Church, left an impression on one John Clifford Peel, a medical student with an interest in aviation. Peel soon
perfect guy for the job
to the Reverend regarding the possibility of using aircraft as a quick method of communication in rural areas, something which the two discussed greatly until Peel joined the Australian Flying Corps as a pilot in 1917 and was deployed to the Western Front in Europe.
This is a fascinating story because something like this, especially being funded by the public, would be difficult to get off the ground. No pun intended. Yeah, just obviously the investment in airplanes is not cheap.
But the idea didn't die with Peel's departure from Australia. During his voyage, Peel continued to brainstorm the project. While on operation in September 1918, however, Peel crashed while on a reconnaissance flight over northeastern France, dying as a result.
Oh my God.
Despite this, the idea did not die with Peel. With aircraft,
that guy's officially a legend.
Aircraft at the time few and far between, Reverend Flynn initially used Peel's legacy of improved outback communication with...
What the heck is that thing? Is he pedaling to power that thing?
The support of innovative human/pedal-powered radio transmitters, transmitting Morse code, and the human voice later on as the technology improved throughout the night.
That's actually the coolest thing ever. That needs its all. I need a whole new video on just this thing. Pedal-powered radio transmit. Is radio transmit that efficient that you can power it with a pedal? That's remarkable.
1920s.
Never seen that here in America. Never heard of it in my life.
The idea of a flying doctor service never left Reverend Flynn's mind. Throughout this time, the Reverend undertook countless fundraising activities with the aim of somehow procuring an aircraft. A handful of experimental aerial medical evacuations were carried out in 1926 and 1927 as proof of concept, and in 1928, Reverend Flynn entered into an agreement with the Queensland and Northern Territory Aerial Services, or Qantas to you and I. This agreement saw Qantas lease Reverend Flynn one single-engine de Havilland DH-50 called Victory, operating under the name of the Australian Aerial Medical Service, with Qantas pilot Arthur Aft.
That's crazy to think this is the original airplane. Like, you're dying and you got to strap on a helmet and fly through the air in this thing. That would be an interesting way. Hey, even if you died, that would be at least one hell of a way to go out.
At the controls, the new Medical Air Service set out on its first mission from Cloncurry to Julius Creek, both in Queensland, with Surgeon Dr. Kenyon Welch on board, and thus Australia had just pioneered the concept of the air ambulance.
Where does it land, though, when it gets back to the hospital?
Even though it had to rely extremely heavily on public fundraising during the Great Depression of the 1930s, the Flying Doctor Service had made a distinct impression on the Australian public as an indispensable asset to Australian and outback life, using pioneering technologies to improve the ways of life and survivability of those out in the bush. In fact,
Amazing. I mean, I guess it lands probably at a landing strip or airport close to the hospital, not at the hospital.
even during the Great Depression, the FDS continued growing and going from strength to strength, adding types such as the de Havilland DH-50s, Fox Moths, Dragons, Doves, and the de Havilland Australia DHA-3 Drover, and the fleet only continued to
Now, that thing looks pretty legit.
grow. In 1942, it was renamed to the Flying Doctor Service, and later given the Royal prefix in 1955, bringing us to the Royal Flying Doctor Service we know today.
I wonder how it got the royal prefix.
As of today, the
Does the Queen have to, like, do something?
RFDS operates 80 aircraft that are essentially flying intensive care units. Their current fleet consists of 4 main types, including 30 Beechcraft 200s and 200Cs, 10 Beechcraft 300C and 350s, 1 Beechcraft 360, 35 Pilatus PC-12s, and 4 of their current flagship and largest aircraft, the Pilatus PC-24s, which is currently the RFDS only jet type. Each aircraft is delivered as is, with none
That
of
thing
the
will get to you quick.
air
It's a beautiful plane.
ambulance interiors fitted until after they land in Australia. These interiors consist of what you might find in the back of a regular ambulance, such as space for stretchers,
Look at all that.
ventilators, IV drips, and other equipment that can be used to stabilize a patient before they arrive at the hospital. Each refit of the cabin will usually take an average of 760 man-hours per aircraft. The difference between the different generations of Beechcraft
Okay, at first I thought he meant between each patient. No, okay. They're talking about retrofitting the airplane.
aircraft in the
Jeez.
RFDS fleet is largely mechanical, as well as differences in avionics, but their dimensions remain the same. In addition to the flight crew, usually just 1 pilot. The Beechcrafts have space for 2 stretchers and 3 flight nurses if need be, but usually only operate with just 1 flight nurse. They can all cruise at 312
What a crazy job that would be. A flight nurse. Shout out to any flight nurses out there.
knots, with a range between 1235
It's
and
probably not very many of you.
1,806 nautical miles, depending on the variant. The Pilatus 12 is the largest single type in the fleet. It too has the capacity of 3 flight nurses and 2 stretchered patients, although usually only 1 nurse, but has a minor lead
Wow.
in terms of practicality over the Beechcraft, as the cockpit doors allow the pilots to perform a walk-around without having to disturb a patient in the cabin. It can cruise at 285 knots for 1,845 nautical miles. The Pilatus PC-24 is the largest type operated by the RFDS. Called Emergency Wards, the PC-24 has a capacity for 3 stretchered patients and up to 4 medical flight crew. With only 4 in the fleet, these aircraft have to be based across the country in order to maximize their speed and range in the widest radius. Currently, they are based in Jandakot, as well as Broome, West Australia, and in Adelaide, South Australia. The PC-24 can cruise at 440 knots for 1,800 nautical miles.
I don't know enough about planes, guys. I don't know enough about planes
Of the Australian people and the availability
to appreciate what he's saying.
of hospitals therein. As a result, many of their bases are located in the eastern end of the country. Their aircraft have some of the highest utilization of their class. For example, the average Pilatus PC-12 will gain only around 200 flight hours in comparison to the RFDS PC-12s, which accumulate an average of 1,600 per year. That's roughly 4 hours, 25 minutes a day spent in the air just for this single type, which is testament to how vital a service they are and a testament to their commitment to the Australian people. A call-out can be anything from an infection to a major car crash and everything in between. It can happen anywhere, at any time.
That's crazy. You get an infection and they send an airplane to get you.
Sometimes they even have to use roads as emergency landing strips. The pilots and medics are some of the most highly skilled and most highly motivated, highly prized, and highly regarded flight crews in the world, ready to assist anyone, anywhere, at any time of night or day. This is the mission they agreed to complete when flying to the furthest corner, delivering the finest care. It is safe to say that Reverend John Flynn would be truly proud of his Royal Flying Doctor's service.
I'd say so. That is freaking incredible. I doubt there's any flying doctors or nurses watching, but shout out to you. Wow. That's amazing. Thanks for sending that in. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Thanks for watching.